Good evening, listeners, friends of the podcast, lovers of all things A24, horror buffs, fear fanatics, and all others who have found their way on this important milestone in the A24 library. If you're joining us again, welcome back. This is your first time listening, welcome to the party. We are A24 on the Rocks, a movie review podcast tasked with examining every single A24 film in the entire library in chronological order. We also do some pretty cool vibe discussions that cover a variety of topics from our favorite films and movie history to reviews of current movies that fit in A24 aesthetic. On this particular episode, we are reviewing the much-revered 2018 horror modern classic, Hereditary. Often referred to as the modern-day Exorcist, Hereditary has captured the imaginations and minds of scream kings and queens worldwide and launched the legendary and still growing career of Ari Aster, the brilliant mind behind the writing and directing of this masterpiece, as well as another A24 horror heavyweight, Midsommar. The film was produced on a budget of $10 million and went on to gross more than $80 million worldwide, making it A24's highest-grossing film until it was recently unseated by Everything Everywhere All at Once. But before we dive headfirst into this tale of demonic infestation and diabolic obsession, I need to introduce my co-hosts for this evil affair. And we have a special guest joining us, friend of the pod, a paranormal anthropologist who is currently pursuing her PhD in anthropology, Reya Mazzola. Welcome back. And why don't the rest of you fallen angel types tell the people who you are and what you're drinking on this momentous occasion?
I'm Eric, and I'm drinking Jefferson's Reserved, very old batch. I bought this just because Cole told me that if I drink any other whiskey besides Jefferson's Reserve, he will definitely bring a demon to my house and possess me and cause me to kill my whole family. So that is why I am drinking this one. Cole, what are you drinking?
Yeah.
Today I am drinking a lemonade shandy, staying a little light, enjoying the last moments of summertime in Alaska. So, bringing the beer, bringing the sunshine. Let's go to you, Kelly.
Hi, this is me, Kelly, and I live in the same house as Eric, and I also don't want him to possess and therefore kill me. So I too am drinking Jefferson's Reserve. Very good.
Yes.
Reya, again, welcome. What are you drinking?
Hello, I am drinking a simply spiked strawberry lemonade because I couldn't think of anything more summery than a big old can of alcoholic lemonade.
Oh, yeah.
Silos, look at those things, they're massive. And that leaves me, Kevin K. Konkonachek, as the supernatural conductor on this dark undertaking. I'm drinking a particularly strong bottle of whiskey tonight. It's a Whistle Pig 6-year rye, because this movie freaked me the fuck out, and I can't wait to talk about it. So, without further ado, hail Pyman, and let's begin. A24 on the Rocks. Hereditary is the 2018 American supernatural horror film written and directed by Ari Aster and his feature directorial debut. Starring Toni Collette, Alex Wolff, Millie Shapiro, Ann Dowd, and Gabriel Byrne. The film follows a grieving family tormented by a demonic entity after the death of their secretive grandmother. Hereditary is often praised for its psychological depth and its exploration of grief and family drama, all while under the dark cloak and guise of a horror movie. Known for its atmospheric horror and its slow-burning tension, Hereditary relies on the gradual approach to build unease rather than relying on jump scares or other classic horror tropes. Hereditary is also known for its creepy and unsettling imagery, as well as an incredibly strong performance by our lead actress, Toni Collette. So the first question for the group: who's here has seen this movie before? And would you consider yourself a big fan of Hereditary in general? So I assume all four of you have seen this before. Am I correct?
Yes.
Aye.
Yep. All right. And all four of you would consider yourselves a fan of this film before coming back to review it.
Hi.
Absolutely. Hail Pyman.
Beautiful. So, hail Pyman. So, for our guests out there, I watched it for the very first time this week for this podcast. So I am the odd man out. If you've been following us since the beginning, you know that I had watched a grand total of 0 A24 films before we started this endeavor, and now I've caught up to whatever we are at 60-something of them. But This one I've been looking forward to for some time. So here we are. And is Hereditary a A24 title, Eric, this one's to you, that made you interested in A24 in general when it first came out? Was it something about that particular title that kind of made you latch on to A24 moving forward?
No, I actually watched this first in 2020, like when we were all in lockdown, and Kelly was actually working, and I decided to just turn on a horror movie in the middle of the day. And I picked this one because I was like, oh, A24. And I knew A24 at that point from The Witch and Moonlight and The Lighthouse. And I had actually, and I think I saw Midsommar before I even saw this one. And then I, connected all the dots. This is A24, Ari Aster. And I watched it in the middle of the day and was still super scared by it. It didn't even matter that it was broad daylight and that my wife was in the other room working. I was still, it scared the shit out of me. So this film didn't bring me to A24, but it definitely endeared me to A24 even more.
Anybody else didn't want to answer that question? When did you see Hereditary for the first time, and did you know it was A24, or kind of did it, what was your story with that? Reya, why don't you go next?
Sure, yeah, I'll chime in. So I actually had zero idea what A24 was until I saw this film. And I may have, seen movies that were under the A24 umbrella before, but, this was the first movie where I'm just like, man, this studio likes to mess people up mentally. And yeah, Hereditary was just a awesome foray into the studio's just general theme, and I really enjoyed it. And I actually saw it, so I have a group of friends that do a horror movie marathon on Halloween, and this movie had just come out the year before, I think. And we watched it, and the whole time I'm watching this film, I'm like, I am uncomfortable. I am unsettled, and I was so freaked out by this film that I had to go home and I couldn't sleep, and I had to watch something upbeat for me to calm my mind, and I chose Thor Ragnarok to calm me down.
It's a great choice. Great choice.
And this movie was just so intense, it's crazy.
All right, Kelly and Cole, I want to know about your first viewing experiences with Hereditary.
Since
we're on the topic.
Eric already kind of gave an idea, so I'm working, right, when Eric watches it for the first time. I didn't even know anything about it. But when Midsommar came out, which is the same director, later, this is something that I get to...
It would have been the year before I watched this, actually.
Yeah.
Midsommar came out.
Yeah. Chronologically, in Ari Aster's life, it comes out after, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't know A24 so much at the time. I didn't know what Ari Aster meant. I just heard about this movie called Midsommar coming out, and I'm very interested in that kind of culture, and I like a horror movie. So I get to forever brag that I took Eric to the theater to see Midsommar. Changed everything. And then, sometime after that, Eric says, hey, I just watched this other movie, same director. Let's watch it again together. And I can't believe that it had slipped under my radar and that I hadn't heard of it before. So we watched it then together later. At that time, I was probably somewhat aware of what A24 meant, and I knew all that it meant to me at the time was anytime Eric showed me a movie that I thought was good, it usually started with the A24 logo. So when I saw this again, I was like, oh, okay, I'm ready. So that's when I watched it. It was with Eric at our house, and yeah, definitely this and Midsommar both stand up a lot on their own two separate pillars.
Fantastic. Cole, round us out.
Yeah, so I think I kind of fell into the same category as Eric with watching it during the lockdown. I was with my girlfriend at the time, and we watched, I think, The Lighthouse, and because I really wanted to watch that, and then she wanted to watch a horror movie, so then we watched Midsommar, and then that led into Hereditary. And I mean, all of them are just fantastic films, but it wasn't the one that brought me into A24. I think you all know that Rover is one that's near and dear to my heart. That came out many years, many moons before this one, but definitely it was one that had fallen through the cracks that I had been wanting to watch for a long time, and then finally watched it and was like, lived up all to the hype, and it still does. Spoiler.
Spoiler. Kelly, you had mentioned something right before you ended there, how Hereditary and Midsommar both stand up on their own, but you also mentioned that they're kind of on this pedestal. So why is Hereditary put on this pedestal for so many film fans? What is it about this now modern gold standard for the elevated horror genre kind of why? Just without going too far into it, kind of just, a basic overview.
To touch on it, I really think that there's two aspects of it that both would stand as a really solid movie on their own. One story just being a slow burn atmospheric horror with creepy elements and lore and cult, but you don't fully see the whole cult. You just know that they're weaving a web and there's this demonic aspect. There's all this. That would still be a good movie. Shot in this really how do I use that word? Cinematic way.
Cinematic.
Yes. All of that would stand and be a good movie. It might be forgot about in a few years and people would keep talking about it. But then you have the second part, which would also be a good movie on its own. And that's the psychological aspect. That's the name of the movie, Hereditary. The fact that it is this kind of generational passing on that goes from one to the other that I think touches people really deeply, especially I think people of our generation, but it's true for all. I saw a quote in an article on Medium from Chris Osmond that said, what matters to the older generation gets shared or not with the younger. That's not an exact quote, but whether they want to share it or not, the younger generation is affected by it. So even just a movie stripped of that first aspect I said, I think that stands alone as a good movie. It explores a lot of things that I don't think are brought to light all the time, and especially not in film. And then you mix those two together, and it's weaved together in a really beautiful pattern, I would say. That's what makes this kind of stand the test of time.
Eric, anything else you want to add on there, and why you think that Hereditary kind of is on this pedestal above some of the other horror films in the same genre?
She said most of it all very well, and I'll also say, well, it's constantly been ranked as one of the top 10 scariest films of the last 15 years. But then also, I think there's something in here about 20 minutes in, I don't know the exact time code, that really it makes a mark in people's minds. And I think that people are so jarred that the director-writer Ari Aster decided to kill off what seemed like a main character so early on, and that just sticks in people's heads. And I think that even if, I don't know if I've ever met a person that doesn't like this film, but let's say I did meet a person that didn't like this film, they would still remember that scene, and it would stick with them forever, I think, because it's so jarring when it happens. But then besides that, like Kelly said, so cinematic, and there's a lot of metaphors in here that I think when people read further into it, they can really latch onto. So, yeah.
Okay, we're going to jump right into it. Opening of the film. Hereditary opens with expositional text. We get a black screen with white lettering, and it's something that you normally could be considered cliche or a trope in some places, but in this particular sense, I feel like it was refined and presented really well. You recognize it immediately as a very simple obituary for our recently deceased Ellen Graham. Cole, what did you think about this technique for a start? Did it go right past your brain? Did you think about it for more than 30 seconds? Kind of, what was your thought with the cold open that way?
I will say I'm never the biggest fan of cold opens with just a bunch of text thrown at you. I'm not a big reader, but I definitely get, especially after doing a rewatch or watching it again, you understand the context and why he's doing it, and I don't hate it, but I don't love it. I'm watching a movie. I want to be shown things, not told to read things, kind of thing. So but it's fine. It gets the point across. It sets the stage. It lets you know who died, what's happening, in kind of real quick and dirty way. I think Ari Aster probably has a little bit more creative juices. I think he could have come up with something maybe a little bit better, but I can't fault the guy.
Fair enough. So Kelly, do you agree with Cole why it was put in there, why we included, or why we started with this was just to show show the audience that someone had died?
So unlike Cole, I do love to read. Just kidding. Sorry, Cole. I quite like the opening. I will say it puts an immediate kind of panic in me because I'm I want to make sure I'm reading every single part that might be important. I don't want to miss anything. But I think that might be intentional because it does put that panic in me. And I am I'm not.
I also hate that.
I think it immediately puts you into a emotional kind of affected state. So that's a good way, in my opinion, to start a movie like this. Also, I have no context of who's important, what's important in that whole entire little what is it called? A obituary. And there's so many names, and I'm just trying to pick them up and grab everything I can. And like as soon as I'm ready to reread it and try to read it better, it's gone. So immediately put into a state of just like, do I need to pause it? Should I go back? Should I do this? And like, I don't do any of that. I'm pretending I'm in a theater. I can't possibly have that control. So I quite like that opening. Also, just on a typographic standpoint, because I got to do that. Beautifully done. If they kept it looking like it was in a newspaper, like the really short from left to right, and that just shows like an effort of care. The fact that they did that intentionally instead of just here's just like we'll use the full width of the screen, for example. I like that.
So right afterwards, we get the opening scene, and it basically, I would agree with you 1,000%, Kelly, that you get that tone of unease and foreboding right off the bat, right? As we're getting that wide pan around the room, and it begins with that slow, lingering shot, and it reveals as that intricately detailed miniature dollhouse. The camera gradually zooms in on one of the rooms, seamlessly transitioning to a miniature of the actual interior of the real house, specifically the bedroom of the teenage son, Peter. Eric, what did you think about this opening scene, especially the stylistic choice to use the miniature with the transition into the real-life scene? What does it tell the viewer as far as what the movie might feel like or kind of maybe might be about? Just kind of digest that scene for me a little bit.
I mean, I think it's just a cool effect. I've seen that in a lot of other films, like just slowly zoom into the miniature and then it, comes into a real scene. I think it's just a cool effect. I'm not sure if it means much more than that. But yeah, that scene, too, it's just, you could tell, like, the mom is just looking around, like, who are all these people here? And it begins this kind of mysteriousness about the mom, the late mom, and the life she might have led that you would have known nothing about. And I also think that obituary, starting out with that obituary, it's just a very standard obituary, and it makes you think about all the obituaries you've read, and what more could have went on in that person's life that obviously will just never be encapsulated in an obituary. And in this case, it's just like even the mom, like she even says in her speech that my mother was an enigma. And looking around at all these random people in the room, she's just like, I really didn't know my mom very well. And obviously we slowly unravel the life of the mom throughout the film. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That moving right into the funeral scene as quickly as they did was definitely a little bit jarring for me. The only reason I want to hold on to that dollhouse scene a little bit is that I want to ask this to Reya. There are some people that have basically said that it's not an allegory, but a way of representing that the Graham family specifically, their entire lives are essentially being lived in a dollhouse under the control of, we'll call it the cult in this circumstance, or evil fortresses, evil forces in general. Do you think there's any truth to that? Do you think that there are folks that probably do believe that there are evil forces controlling their lives like that, and Hereditary is specifically showing the miniatures? Do you think there's a correlation between those two things?
Wow, so that's a really big question. So, I mean, my first take on this is, like, as a viewer watching the film, the way that, like, Toni Collette's character just sets up the dollhouses and you see these scene transitions and you see a lot of stuff that isn't actually, like, mirrored, like, in the actual film. It just shows you, like, all of the, like, variability that exists when you're looking at this very large play space of this top-down entity, being this cult that is controlling this family, like, from a distance. And I mean, there's definitely evidence of that, like, in everyday life. Like, if you look at the way that any cult activity kind of just encapsulates the entire lives of the people that are in it. Like, I mean, anecdotally speaking, I met someone who was a recent, like, ejectee from the Jehovah's Witnesses, and, like, she would define the Jehovah's Witnesses being, like, a cult. And the way that they just had their nails in what she could do, who she could see, like, and you kind of just get that sort of, like, manipulation and just, like, molding within Hereditary by us seeing the way that these figures are being used and having their autonomy stripped, like, within the dollhouse throughout the entire film. and I thought that imagery was like really, really interesting.
And it's something that they revisited multiple times throughout the entire film, which I think is so brilliant to me. Like there was always something after a certain amount of scenes where you go back to Annie's hobbyist as a model, and there's so many different things that we could digest and break down in all those different aspects. But I really think it was very apparent from the beginning, exactly like you said, that maybe not apparent when I was watching it, certainly not apparent when I was watching it, but now apparent on the digesting and the breakdown that it was very intentional that Ari Aster had that. We're going to zoom out on the dollhouse, and then we're going to zoom in their lives inside the dollhouse. And then everything you're about to see is now controlled by whatever is in this moment, in this place. So I thought that was really cool, and it set up just a much more creepy vibe because you just had this feeling that it was about life inside itself. Kelly.
Yeah, to add on to that, the word that you used is control. And I think that that's a big reason why it is Annie's hobby. If we just talk about trying to get into her brain, I think a lot of her life is outside of her control. So the fact that this is the thing that she does, not even as a hobby, but as a career, she gets full control. She gets to set the scene. She gets to choose everything about this whole aspect. And then that's, of course, the overarching narrative that Reya brings up. But I think that's another example of there's two meanings behind the reason that this is brought into the film.
Absolutely. The last thing I want to touch on the funeral scene before we move on is, Eric, you kind of had touched on it. There's this huge air of mystery around Grandma. Like this idea that you have no idea who Ellen Graham was, and the apparent shock on Annie's face about all of these people. On a second watch through, knowing who those people are, now that you have gone through the movie and now you're about to start it again, and you see these faces, did the second time, did you recognize the cult members in the crowd during the funeral? Did you put that together immediately upon your second watching? And do you think that's relevant for the entirety of the story, that these cult people are front and center from point A of this film?
Yes. And yeah, the second watching, you start really picking people out in the crowd, especially the guy who stares at Charlie when Charlie goes up to Annie's mom's casket. You know, you look at that guy and you're like, wow, I've seen that guy's penis. And yeah, so it's true. Like you definitely like start picking out all these people in the crowd, and you're like, wow, I can't believe that the first time I watched this, I had no clue what was going to happen. And the second time I've watched it, you could like probably pause and then see all these people and be like, all of these people are part of this whole film and come into the forefront later. So I think that it's on the second watch, it's even, I'd say even better than the first watch. It's definitely one of those films that like each time you watch it, you notice more things. And as we've said about A24 films in the past, or just film in general in the past, when that's a thing where you like it even more on each watch, then that is such a good mark of how great a film it is.
1,000%. All right, Cole, a question for you. When Annie was given the eulogy and some of the comments afterwards from Peter and her about the not feeling sad or not knowing if you should feel more sad, did you feel like it was cold? Like, I don't know. For me, watching it for the first time, not knowing who this grandma was, I was kind of like, that was just a mean thing to say. And like, the kid didn't care and the wife didn't care. I was like, what did she ever do to you? So that was my first impression. What was kind of, what are your thoughts on that?
People always grieve in different ways, so you can never judge someone by how they grieve. But also, everyone has family members that, you love your family or they're part of your family, but they might not be the best people in the world. And I don't think this grandma was necessarily the best person in the world. And I mean, even, Anne, she talks about how when her grandmother or when Anne's mother moved in with them, and before that they were not on talking terms, and it was very stressful and not great. So, I've been to funerals where you feel like you should be sadder than you are, but at the same time, not everyone's the best person in the world, and it's hard to feel the way you feel like you should feel, right? You're just gonna feel what you feel and go on from there.
That's why I think I love this movie so much, because it asks these massive questions in the most simple way possible. Mm-hmm. Like Ari Aster is literally asking your audience, like, what happens if someone in your life dies who's probably generally a bad person or has done you wrong or generally you don't feel an attachment to? Do you feel sad for that person? And you're asking that before you know that this lady is the queen of a goddamn cult trying to bring back this Prince of Satan. And it's so cool that you can break down those two aspects of this film where you go from family drama that, like, we had already talked about at the head of this episode. You could break those two parts away, the supernatural aspect and then the family drama, and this film would be just as fucking awesome just on one side or the other. And then you blending that together, Ari Aster's like, all right, baby, you better get ready for this. And it just jumps you right after it, and I absolutely loved it. So, anybody else want to throw in on that idea, or we just gonna keep on moving? Go ahead.
I'll say that's what this movie becomes kind of relentless with, and that's what Ari Aster I think is kind of relentless with, is making you kind of face kind of like a social anxiety in a way of, or even just like a shame about how you personally feel about something, and you start to question, oh, well, I have a personal, and then boom, he hits you with another one, and then boom, we're on to the next one, and on to the next one, and that's one of the first ones in this movie is like, what happens when shitty people die? What happens when you have to give their elegy?
Eulogy.
What happens? Why am I struggling with words so hard today?
Words are hard.
You don't think I know what a googly is?
Good thing I got you guys.
Googleizer?
This is not hillbilly elegy.
Too good. But regardless of the way I pronounce words or forget them, those are my thoughts of Ari Aster's. Just that's his craft, and that's what he's really good at. And yeah,
Fantastic. So, all right, as the film progresses, we see Annie now, after the funeral, working in her workshop on her miniatures. This is the first time we really get a good view of kind of all of her projects. It shows that she's recreating scenes from her life, and the amount of detail is absolutely incredible. On a second kind of go watch through on some of these scenes and pausing on the models, it really is mind-blowing the amount of detail that went into this film. The miniature models were designed and built by Steve Newburn, the owner of Applied Arcs FX studio in Canada. His team created about 15 detailed models that matched the life-sized film sets. So they matched everything from the color down to the small details so that they could do those sweet zoom-ins that we had talked about and just kind of have that, juxtaposition between the two, including buildings like the funeral home, a preschool, hospice, and the accident scene. The largest model was a copy of the family home. The whole process took about 10 weeks with a crew of about half a dozen people, and they created over 1,000 individual pieces for this film. I thought that was all brilliant, and it really worked really well with all of those themes that we had just touched on about the control and the other pieces that go into that. Eric, miniatures are often used in film, but no one knows that they're using them. In this film, they particularly decided to embrace and then use that element. Did you take note of that while you were watching it? Kind of what are your thoughts just about the miniatures, if you have any?
I just thought it made, like, Annie a very unique character. Like, I've never seen a miniatures artist in film, and I think that's just such a cool little quirk to have for a character. Instead of just making her a painter or something, you made her a miniatures artist, which is such a unique thing. And then I do kind of agree that miniatures are a little creepy, but at the same time, I just see, like, how beautiful they can be, too. The fact that we see Annie's mom, Ellen, we see the apparition of her in the miniatures room, it kind of is, there's a creepy relation to it. Like, you think something else is going to happen. And also, that's where all of Ellen's stuff is, I think, in the miniatures room, too, right? So, like, all of her former stuff is in there. So that room, combined with the miniatures, Ari Aster did such a good job of making it creepy, to having all those things tied together.
I love that scene because I didn't notice the ghost. Maddie did. Maddie did. She's like, "You see that?" I'm like, "What? No, I didn't see. What are you talking about?"
That's even creepier.
There was a fucking ghost. I was like, "I didn't see it." So for the rest of the film, I was like looking for these little tiny apparitions, and then of course I picked up on them. So like later when we get the running and the freaking floating and all that shit. But no, I totally missed it on my first. Wasn't looking for it, so Ari just slipped it in there.
Miniature room was just like the heartbeat of the entire cinematic universe of this film. Like everything always went back to like what was going on in there. Like, obviously Toni Collette's like descent into madness like started in that room. All of her mom's stuff is in that room. She's seeing her mom's apparition in that room.
it's a lot of energy in that room.
If you break down the diagrams or the dioramas that she's actually creating, she's basically reliving the most traumatic experiences of her past. One of the room basically it shows a closed door with the sign like "Get out," which represents basically her mom's like closed off life.
Yeah.
There's the hospice situation, right? We see that picture with her mom standing in the doorway. So it's all cathartic. It's all like very much she's creating this because it's her way of, I mean, even to where she creates, right, and she creates the death scene, as we get to that here in a second, immediately upon that, because that's the only way she knows how to process her trauma, which is just terrifying in its own self. So,
also, her mom trying to give breast milk to Charlie. That's one of the
why
miniatures.
making that a diorama, like how much that must have hurt or like destroyed you inside to make that into a detailed diorama the way you did, like
Who's buying these?
yeah, somebody, clearly.
I mean, I would buy a little
Gallery.
miniature, but yeah. Anyway.
They use scale really well in this, obviously, when you're dealing with miniatures. But when you talk about Grandma in the doorway, and then you have Annie's actual real face looking in at it, and it is this amazing thing where it's, you're a real person, and scale-wise, you're much bigger than this, but you can tell that this miniature of her mom holds so much power over her because of the way that they frame that shot. And I feel like I could go through this movie like shot by shot and be like, I can read all this meaning, I can read all that meaning, but I think I would be remiss not to mention that as we're discussing even this area.
There is a YouTube video out there that, no lie, breaks down and explains this entire film. And the running time
They already did it.
4 hours and 30 minutes.
Oh, I saved that to watch later.
It's
I was
bonkers. I got through the first 45 minutes. I'm like, nope, I don't got time. But my point is, Kelly, is somebody's done it. Somebody has sat down and looked at every frame by frame, and that's how deep and crazy this movie is. And I can already tell from our current runtime, and we haven't even gotten out of the first third of this film, that there's a lot to digest. So we're going to kind of move on a little bit here. So we're getting introduced to Charlie. Eric, you had referenced it earlier. We got a main character we are getting introduced to here. This is Annie's daughter, Charlie. She is played by Millie Shapiro, who in real life suffers, thank you, from clideocranial dystosis. I don't think I did that right, but it's close, where the palate and the teeth don't properly develop as a young child, resulting in our slightly deformed look that makes Charlie's character so unique and leads to the general aura in the film. Charlie is shown to be an odd, introverted child. She makes strange clicking noises with her tongue, and it seems it is generally disconnected from the world around her. She is often seen drawing and disturbing pictures, creating odd and unsettling figures out of found objects, and is generally on the outside looking in. So let's talk about Charlie. What do we think about this character? What were your first impressions? And was this viewing different than the others when thinking about Charlie specifically? I guess I'll answer my own question. I honestly had no idea what was going to happen, right? I recognized her face because she's all over the posters. She's all over everything as far as what's relation to this. So the internet had successfully told me who this person was. But like Eric mentioned, we don't expect her to be gone within the first 30 minutes of the film, so for me, I was expecting her to be much more involved, like a Rosemary's Baby type of style of something where it was going to kind of be involved throughout the entirety of the film. But when that didn't happen, my expectations were subverted, what makes for a great film. Reya, tell me about Charlie a little bit. What do you think?
Oh, man, where do I start with Charlie? So, I feel like a lot of my opinions on Charlie kind of, fall towards, the end of the film, where we get to the whole, Peter disposition and stuff. But just general, looking at Charlie at the beginning of the film, I'm just like, this is a creepy little girl. Why do I think why am I so unsettled by this child?
Probably because she cut off the head of a dead bird.
The pigeon.
That's also true.
Yeah.
Also,
kind of creepy even before that.
With scissors.
yeah, and, as someone who watched this film, basically around its release, you're watching it and you're like, oh, we're so Charlie centered. This is going to be a Charlie centered film. Like Kevin said, she's on all of the posters. She's front and center on all of the posters, and then we just she's just poof gone. And honestly, that was something that when you look at films not even in the same genre, but films that lose a character of profound importance, and she holds her importance throughout the film, even though she's not in it. Super strong, just super good, well put together character, and man, I don't have the lack of things to say about Charlie, but I don't know if my opinions on Charlie really fit here right now. More so towards like when we get to the end of the film.
Fair enough. Cole, anything you want to throw in on kind of the introduction to Charlie and what your just opinions, if you can remember what your first thoughts were when seeing her on your first viewing? Just anything you want to toss in on that subject?
I mean, yeah, definitely, like Eric said, first viewing versus your second, third, or fourth viewing after that, much different. When I first watched it, I didn't watch any trailers or anything. What I had heard was this is a great horror movie about generational trauma. And I was just like, oh, okay, that sounds pretty interesting. So I watch it and I'm like, okay, so Charlie's going to be the final generation of this trauma where it's all going to culminate, right? And then, yeah, you get introduced to this girl that is very odd, is the black sheep of almost like society, where she doesn't really have any friends. She's always doing weird, odd things. And then it goes into her cutting a dead bird's head off, and, odd things keep happening around her. And I'm like, okay, so she's either like already possessed or she's going to be some kind of like Rosemary Baby type situation. And then just, out of nowhere, she gets sideswiped by a telephone pole, and, probably one of the most gruesome car accident scenes. Like when that scene is happening, when he's coming back from the party, you're like, okay, she might like something bad's gonna happen, right? She's going into like anaphylactic shock or whatnot from eating nuts, and he's driving, and he just, he's high, or, I don't think he was drinking, which he told his mom he wouldn't drink, but he definitely was high and going 80 something down a old country road. And I was like, yeah, they're probably going to crash or something like that. And they swerve and you see the telephone pole and you're like, oh, he's going to hit it. He doesn't hit it, but I was not expecting the whole head decapitation scene. So that definitely threw me for a loop. And now looking back at it and watching the movie again with like the new set of eyes, Charlie's character is done like so well she's done extremely well the first time you watch it, but then when you rewatch it, it's just the dialogue and her mannerisms and the way they set up and the shot design and just everything is so meticulous and so thought out. It's awesome.
My point with this is that we are introduced to Charlie here, but there is so much of Charlie throughout this film, like Ray has so eloquently put, that we are going to be continually talking about her throughout all of this. But go ahead, Rhea.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to like my trauma from like watching the telephone pole scene. Like you see it happen, you know it's gonna happen. You don't actually like, there's no like indication per se, but just like in the like sphere of what is going on, that like something horrendous is about to happen, and I had to tell the people that I was watching it with, I'm like, pause it. And I literally was just like, what the fuck was that?
And we will get there, and I have similar as well. But there's a couple scenes that happen before that are actually really important that I feel like we should digest a little bit. Mostly when Annie goes to the grief support group, right? And we get some dark details about her mother's past that is really, really important to breaking down what we think, why this is hereditary, why this has been going on from generation to generation. Annie basically says that her brother Charles committed suicide and blamed his own mother and said that she put people inside of him in his suicide note. Why include this scene? Why are we going into this deep dive? It felt almost like a one-off until you think about the content that was divulged in that small amount of time and that place in general. So, Kelly, why do we have this grief support group scene, and what do we use it for as a vehicle for the rest of the film?
First watch versus second watch, it's a totally different situation.
I love that. I want both of the answers.
Yeah, first watch, it is... Ooh, it makes it even scarier on the second watch, because first watch is just, here's this person finally coming to the table. She makes a mention of, like, she needs support, she needs help, but doesn't feel like her family has the capacity for it. And that just makes my heart break for her. And you know that it's just this that's been her nonstop scenario throughout her whole life, because once she finally does have an outlet, she just spills it all. And it's so... like, it is just a face value. That could be a real person's story. That all of these things could happen to a person, and you could live through all of it and just do your best to try to keep on going afterwards. So that's an aspect, and that's all I took it for on the first one. I was like, oh man, she does have a tragic backstory. That sucks. Then on the second watch through, it's like, oh, that was all super intentional. Every single thing that happened had a purpose behind it, and she doesn't know it yet, but I do. And that fills me with a whole lot of dread. It's makes it, the first watch, it's just character development. The second watch, it is torment.
Eric, expound upon this. We have a film now that we can enjoy in two different sittings, in two different viewings at the exact same film.
Yeah.
What the hell?
Well, at first I didn't know this, film would be a big metaphor for generational trauma, but I did pick up on how isolating her grief felt, because her dad starved himself to death, her brother killed himself, and now she's dealing with the death of her mom, who just she knew pretty much nothing about her. It sounds like her mom just kind of gaslit her whole life. And so, an easy thing to say is like, oh, why doesn't she go talk to Steve too, her husband? Like, she's obviously shutting Steve out. Well, Steve has no way to relate. She knows that Steve can't really relate to her. As much as Steve loves her, Steve does not feel this grief to the level that Annie feels. And then obviously her son, she kept Ellen away from Peter his whole life, and the son doesn't really feel any grief for the mother dying, like probably base level grief, but he's just kind of like, oh, I'm fine, I didn't really know her that well. You can tell right away Annie is just so isolated in her grief, and she needs a support group, but even that support group, I think they even say it doesn't make it better, but at least it's a place to go talk about it. So I think that is such a relatable thing for people that have lost a lot of people, is how hard it is for other people, or to find people to relate to. So yeah.
And just another way why this movie makes something as crazy and ridiculous as demonic possession as relatable as it can be about someone losing the death of a loved one. That's what we're talking about here. The two scenes that are briefly, I want to touch on the pigeon incident, right? So we get the one scene where Charlie seemingly controls a pigeon and kills it by slamming it into a window. Were you more scared about the jump scare of the pigeon slamming into the window, or the fact that Charlie completely no-sells the reaction, doesn't flinch, and just stares straight ahead as this bird just smashes? Cole, what do you think? What was more terrifying, her expression or the jump?
I mean, I think the initial jump scare got me the first time, but her non-reaction to everyone else, kind of has almost an Omen feel, where the kid just shows no remorse, knew it was going to happen, and it happens right when the teacher kind of condescends to her for, let's put the toys away and do your quiz, and then all of a sudden a pigeon flies, kills itself, commits suicide in the window. All the other kids are freaking out and whatnot, and she's just motionless, staring forward.
Right, and then grabs a pair of scissors and chops the head off.
And all she could think about is, man, that is gonna make one heck of a doll.
She cuts it. Is it's like a normal scissor cut for her. She's just
a doll, man.
It's almost like she almost had a demon inside of her telling her that she needed to do that for some reason or another.
She's making miniatures too, in a way.
Eric, you remembered miniature again. You said you'd never seen miniatures before in film, and it reminded me of you see the movie Dinner for Schmucks?
I've never seen a miniatures artist. I've seen miniatures.
Sure.
Yeah.
Dinner for Schmucks with Steve Carell. Anybody?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
What a wild
Star Wars
comparison.
The Death Star was a miniature,
he's a weird guy who makes diagrams.
Yeah,
right?
dioramas with the.
I am moving on. All right, so. We're talking about this high school party. We've already broke it down a little bit. It gets kind of weird, but there's something that happens before the party where it's Peter asking his mom if he can go. And she basically says, take your sister. Why? Why is Annie so convinced or so needs the reason to send the daughter? Was it a way to embarrass Peter? Was it a way to stick it to him in his stupid face, as we hear later in the film? It felt like she was being unnecessarily aggressive towards him in this scene, and it results in the inevitable death of her daughter. So I don't want to spend too much time, but I feel like this scene was actually kind of important, right? Especially because if you think about it later on where they are blaming each other in the, well, why was she there, Mom? Well, because you said she was supposed to be there. Why is she dead? Because you were driving. So this scene, when they're having the breakdown, oof, I thought it was heavy. I thought it was definitely something that I'd walked away from, like, being, man, that, I don't know, what would you deal with in that circumstance? Kelly, you first. Rhea, you're next.
Yeah, it's kind of like the grief counseling group. You could watch it one way, which is this is a mom trying to pawn off her kid to make sure that the older brother is responsible and that the younger sister gets socialized and they have time outside the house together. Or you could watch it like Annie's wearing this necklace with a certain symbol on it, and that pole also has a certain symbol on it, and they're going to drive past that pole that night. So I wonder if that's a connection, and there might be some strings being pulled elsewhere that these things were intentionally set forward and maybe out of her control to stop.
Which I will ask you about again very shortly. Rhea, what do you think?
To add to Kelly's point, so like the scene's obviously used as a way to like cause this like rift between like Toni Collette and Peter, and to have this conflicting viewpoints of like whose fault is it. But then to Kelly's point, and back to the whole like idea of the miniatures and like someone else being in control of everything, like I feel like at no point there's no one that has any control over what they're actually doing, which goes back to the brief mention of her brother killing himself because the mom was putting people in his head, and the only way that he stopped that was by killing himself, which obviously like throws a wrench in the overarching plan that we know deeper into the film. And so is there this trajectory that they're on? I think that there is supposed to be, and it's just who is going to be irresponsible enough to kickstart this chain reaction to make it all start to work the way it's supposed to.
Absolutely, which leads us right into the party itself. I mean, it could be a conspiracy theory, or it could be just straight up great question. Who's making the chocolate cake in the house? Why are they using such a redonkulous amount of nuts? This is a high school party, all right? Like, is it cult members? Yeah, I'm a little facetious, but at the same time, you really could think that they probably found a way to line all of this up from start to finish, knowing he would be at a certain spot in time. Cole, what do you think as the detail-oriented man of the group?
One of Peter's friends is in the cult, because he does show up at the very end, the one with the man bun. So, I don't know if he's the one that invites him or tells him about the party.
Bring your dick.
Yeah, I don't know if he's
it might
one.
have been him.
But
he for sure was the one who gave him the weed that was laced with the herbs that allowed payment to enter. But anyway.
But there's definitely and that one took me a few watches to see that. So like there's definitely a little, again, just so much thought went into this. I imagine the director just standing in front of a giant board with like string and pins and everywhere, going about how everything's connected and how everyone is a part of the cult, but no one is. And
Pepe Sylvia.
Yeah, like it's so good. But everything is planned out from the get-go, and it's all a part of this grand scheme that the Queen put together for everything. So.
Absolutely. Rhea?
The Queen scheme.
It is a Queen scheme. Slay. I going back to this is two different movies upon first and second in your rewatch, and just being like that person's involved in this. What are they doing? But just to just think that there is just always going to be someone in any scene that you're watching with more than just the main cast of characters that is involved in the them losing their autonomy. There's someone that's pushing them in certain directions, the whole reason why the mom's friend and the support group exists. And that was the big reveal, right? That she was a part of this thing, but that was the overt one, and there's all of the side characters that you don't think of that are also just. Is it the shop owner? Is it the milkman? Who is it? And to think that
it's hot
and
fuzz.
to think that it goes that deep, at a high school party, that there's children involved as well, really gets you thinking. And then you go back to, well, why would the mom want Charlie to go in the first place? I think it leads more to the point of, like, I'm grieving my mother. I don't want to deal with anybody's nonsense. Get all of my kids out of the house. But, like, that neglect and that, like, just over the head, not really thinking about anything at the time is probably what's being used as a filter for the cult to kind of just be like, oh, she's grieving. We can, like, work around these mechanisms.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And as we see later in the film, when they have that big debate at the dinner table about whose fault it is, you are left on the fence as a viewer because you can feel both sides of that argument, from Peter's side and from Annie's side as well, because we're kind of left in that place to answer that question of why. Why did Peter take her? Why did Peter
I also
leave
think
her,
the mom was just trying to stop, she was worried Peter was going to drink and take her car, and so she was like, oh, well, if Charlie goes with him, then he at least won't drink as much, and then also she knows that Charlie probably doesn't get along with, his friends very well, and so Peter will be a little embarrassed and not want to stay out as late if Charlie goes with
Peter
him.
That's
said
what
it
I
was
felt.
a school,
I felt like she was doing that.
He said it was a school barbecue, and they both go to the same school.
That's what he said, and
Yeah.
it's just like, well, Charlie can maybe, at least socialize a little bit more if, she goes out with Peter. So,
I
and
suppose
they're
she was
constantly worried
a
about
freshman
Charlie.
in high school, according to her age.
Yes, I think she's a freshman. Well, Peter's probably a junior.
Which I never clicked at any point in that film. I just perceived Charlie to be a child
I thought
the
she was
whole
in
time.
school.
Yeah, and then you're like, oh, she's in high school? Go rage, girl. What the fuck? Go get your head
Yeah, let's
decapitated. Let's
disconnect.
go.
Kelly?
Yeah, so I wanted to mention the fact that I think that this is something that we keep touching on, and it's something I noticed on the second watch. And you guys know that I pay good attention in a movie when there's a classroom scene and the teacher's going to teach us something, because I think directors use that more often than not as a vehicle to tell us exactly what the movie's about. And I'm not saying that this is what the movie's about, but I think it's something that's important. There's a Greek tragedy that's being told about this inevitable fate. Does it make it more or less tragic to know that you can't change it? And that question, I don't think I even paid attention to the first time I watched this movie, because there's so much else going on and there's more prominent threats that I need to pay attention to. But on the second watch, I went, oh my gosh, light bulb moment. That's largely what this whole entire movie is about. And does it make it more or less tragic? There is an answer to it, but I sat here and I have thought about it so much ever since. And it is that whole thing of, do you have free will, or is everything predetermined? Is fate an aspect to it? And in this movie, instead of fate or predestination being something from God, it's predestination by a cult, which all of these cult members, until proven right in their beliefs, could be seen as schizophrenic, could be seen as mentally ill, could be seen as all of these things, and wreak havoc on their entire families until proven right. And then probably even more tragic, so.
Which, again, if you separated the cult from the other story, then we just are left with schizophrenia and mental illness. But then if you add the cult, then you all now of a sudden have an explanation on why those things are happening, which just blends these two stories again together on such a ridiculous level. All right, we keep skipping around this or not, but yeah, so her head explodes, right? So we get the scene. Peter's driving. Charlie's head is hanging out the window. I had no idea, right? So I'm sitting there, and just like Reya described, you know it's coming. As soon as you see that window coming down, her head going out, you're like, oh, crap, here it comes. But
55 burgers, 55 fries.
I didn't think about the,
Stop, I'm doing
intentional... The intentional drop of the dead animal in the middle of the road by what presumably was the cult, right? It could have been a roadkill. I'm going to assume it was the cult putting it there on purpose. But that scene was frickin' whack. Like, holy shit, came out of left field. No idea it was coming. And the best part for me was Peter's reaction. That stone face, not even going to look behind me in the back seat, not even going to verify anything, knowing fully what you've done. And you're just going to let your foot off the gas and slowly let the car move forward and drive off into the night. From a cinematic standpoint, chef's kiss. Just absolutely brilliantly well done. From a thematic standpoint, holy
and it doesn't end there,
fuck.
too.
Right, exactly. If you think about that, he drives
You think
home.
there's going to be a confrontation when he comes home. You think he's going to say, nope.
Just leaves her in the back seat.
Just
for
leaves
the mom
her in
to
the
find.
back seat.
Goes to bed. Doesn't sleep.
The next morning, Annie discovers her daughter's body decapitated, leading to one of the most harrowing scenes in the entire fucking movie, where she's just screaming, and you get this close-up of Peter's face as he's just listening, and holy fuck. So let's talk about this scene a little bit. Eric, what were your impressions, just in general, all of the things from the post-decapitation through the realization?
Well, without like spoiling another movie, but like I think of Psycho, where they make a big choice for something to happen. I just love the gall of Ari Aster to kill off a main character within the first 30 minutes.
Awesome.
And it's just like, it sets up the whole rest of the movie in a whole different way. It completely throws a gigantic wrench in like what every viewer thought was going to happen. Peter reacting how he did, I think everybody here probably thinks, oh, I definitely wouldn't react that way. I'd call the cops immediately. But no, not everybody would. Like, I think it's such a Ari Aster choosing for Peter to do that, or writing that into the script. I think it's just a very human reaction. And, you know, everybody would like to think, oh, yeah, of course I would call the cops immediately. But no, most people probably wouldn't, especially, you know, if it was their own sister. They probably would freak the fuck out, try to, you know, go into denial, try to act like it just didn't happen, and go home and act like, okay, I'm just going to
wake up from your
He doesn't
dream.
even go to sleep, you know, but like, I'm just going to lay in my bed and just pretend that didn't happen.
Well, you have to he was like
Felt
super
real.
high too, right?
It felt,
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you're just like, he's in the state of like denial where he's just like, maybe I hallucinated all of this.
yeah.
Yeah, and like
And it's these writing choices that I think Ari Aster puts in his films that most other writers don't. Like, I don't think a lot of other writers / directors would have had that written Peter in that kind of way to react to that death in that kind of way. Most people, especially considering it's a horror film, they'd have the main, you know, Peter just start screaming or something, be like, oh my god, you know, but no, this is actually a way more human reaction, so it makes the film feel way more real to you. And and obviously the first time I watched it, I was like, oh my fucking god, what the fuck, you know?
Yeah. I remember turning to Maddie being like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, just being
Yep.
like, what?
And now I watch it, and I, you know, it's kind of fucked up, but I kind of just smile like, oh, this scene's coming.
Yep.
And just like, oh my gosh, all right.
It is another aspect with, like the funeral scene and like a lot of scenes in between and everything, but I want to go back to what I had said about that. It puts you in a situation that hopefully you never find yourself in, but it's another one of those of what does a real human actually do? And I think a lot of people in the face of incomprehensible trauma freeze and do not acknowledge and disengage and completely like out of body. So it's one of those, and I do think he stays traumatized after that, and he already had a lot going on from what we already hear happened with his sleepwalking mom beforehand. So the fact that this happens and he reacts that way, and the way that they shoot it and just follow him really close on his face, and the fact that he keeps looking kind of in the rearview mirror, but then stopping before he can actually look.
And the camera shot, too, of him looking in the
Yeah.
rearview mirror, so good.
That is well documented on the screen for sure. I really appreciate that part of the movie.
I feel like this is a great time to talk about Toni Collette specifically. I know we've kind of danced around it, but her performance in this film is really incredible, and it's such a shame that she didn't get any sort of recognition for this role. There's something about, and not just this scene, it's every scene that she plays the most hysterical, over-the-top individual. I don't know, I just was really impressed. I thought it was something that made it. It reminded me, and this is terrible, I don't know, who is the actress from The Shining?
Shelley Duvall.
Shelley Duvall. It reminded me of
I'm
her
Shelley
performance in The Shining. Just the especially the bathroom scene as Jack Nicholson is coming through the wall with the hatchet. Like, there was just something similar about those two. Maybe it was their face style. Maybe it was the way they were acting. But talk to me about Toni Collette. Did you enjoy it? Was she great? Just all the things involved. Cole, you first, then Reya, you're next.
Yeah, I mean, I think I love her as an actress. I think she's always phenomenal. And in this film, I don't think there's anyone that did a bad job. I think they embodied everything so perfectly, and the director got everything out of them. And I think it's a lot easier when you have such a good script as well. Not saying that acting is easy, but her performance and just everything from her when she does get possessed and stuff, where she just kind of flips a switch and completely changes her whole body and everything, to be able to do that as just from a performance standpoint is impressive. But then all of her emotion and how intense and kind of overbearing and scary she can get, to like how hurtful she can be, with not even including the dialogue, just like the way she looks at someone, like she looks at Peter during that dining room scene and stuff, of just shooting venom from her eyes kind of thing. Like, just absolutely nailed every single person, every character, every actor, actress that they hired, everything about it. They just, I don't know, they found the perfect person and they nailed it. It was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Reya, what do you think about Toni Collette?
To start, I am a big United States of Terra fan. So seeing Toni Collette actually in this film was very weird to me, because that is not this is not the character that I've known her to be. So it was very interesting for her to be in this new element of being this basically Scream Queen adjacent role. But I want to talk about the Charlie grieving scene, because I don't think, and it's been said before, I don't think that there is a more powerful scene in this entire film than that one. And there's a lot of very unsettling ones, but when you're watching this, you're just wow, what does grieving your child look and feel like? And at the time, I'm this is just guttural and so unnerving, and makes you feel it in your soul. And as someone who has experienced loss like that, and has gone through essentially the same kind of emotions, you can't relate until you feel it yourself. But she just exudes this pain that I've never seen in a movie ever. And this is a horror film, right? You're supposed to be scared, but in that moment, you're being hurt and you're being scared in a different kind of way. And I think that carries, that aura from that scene carries through the entire film up until the very end. And you're just never the same after that scene. And that's just the way that I took this film. But man, just immense acting from Toni Collette in that scene.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
I'll touch on that scene, and then I'll talk about Toni as an actress in this movie. But on that scene specifically, I love it too. I told when I was watching with Eric, I was like, it's animalistic, the way that she mourns in that moment, and the way that they show it we're standing outside of the bedroom with your parents inside. What would they do if you were kind of responsible possibly for your sibling dying in a really tragic way? The fact that they frame it in that way, they could have just put the camera in the room and had shown it, and it still would have been impactful, but they chose to put us like a family member because they put the camera where they did. But also, Toni as an actress in this movie is phenomenal. I think that that goes without saying, obviously, but I would compare her. It's because she has an expressive face that she's not afraid to use every single little miniature muscle on it. And she's a very physical actress too in this movie. When she even says, "I never wanted to be your mom," grabs her face. Like those kind of scenes, the fact that they show it from like almost like play standpoint with her on the right, him on the left that's such a good choice too. But it made me think of I would compare her to like Jamie Lee Curtis in even like these recent episodes of The Bear. I feel like they are two actresses that are not afraid to use every single muscle in their entire body to show huge emotion, because you can't show emotion on the inside, you got to show it with every muscle of your body in this kind of scene. I was also going to compare her to, and I feel like I'm lessening the impact because of us talking about the grieving scene specifically, but I think Adam Driver, we had him in a previous discussion about, I don't remember the movie now, but
we
it's
were
in
young.
Yeah, and in the catalog as well. Not that he shows a grieving scene, but he's also a very physical actor that uses his whole body, and he does it really well in Marriage Story. And I would compare her to him as well. I think that these are actors that we should keep an eye on because they're really good at being extremely emotive, really making us feel what we're supposed to feel or what they think we're supposed to feel.
I had forgotten about While We Were Young, Eric. I mean, I had to look it up real quick, and I was like, oh, man, that was a thing.
Yeah.
Ben Stiller.
Was that 2015? Or...
Go look up our episode when they were young.
Well, no, when did it come out, the movie?
I don't even remember, buddy. 2014.
2014, wow, that was one of her first ones, yeah.
Yeah. I've been doing this for a while. All right, we're moving on. In the aftermath of Charlie's death, the family spirals into grief and isolation. Peter is consumed by guilt, while Annie becomes increasingly detached and begins to experience strange phenomena around the house. She starts to work on miniatures depicting Charlie's death, indicating her inability to process the tragedy in a healthy way. Reya, it is presumed that after Charlie's death, the soul or spirit of Paimon is bouncing from place to place and is represented by this solar flare or bright light. We start seeing it a lot more obviously after these scenes. Is there any lore to back this up? Is this how a soul of the King of Hell might act given in this circumstance? What are your thoughts on the way they represented the fleeting soul of our apparition?
So, in the frame of this film, Paimon is Charlie, right? Charlie, soul of Charlie, and she is the reincarnation of Paimon in some capacity, and her soul is adrift. And I feel like a lot of the scenes are actually like, and this is just how I took it, like kind of shot from Charlie's perspective, like as a ghost. Like the scene where like she's like looking at her mom like grieving, and then there's a bunch of like weird like camera angled shots where I'm just like, who's supposed to be looking inward at this? And I think in a lot of instances it's supposed to be Charlie. And just in a base level capacity, if we're thinking like, okay, the cult is like Paimon is Charlie. Paimon is this demon lord of hell or whatever. But Paimon, in actuality, is just a child. Is a child who is now bodiless and formless and is just this soul that's bouncing from place to place. And as you see it, like at the end of the film when Charlie possesses Peter's body and then takes on like Charlie's mannerisms, that's just Charlie. And whether or not you remove the paranormal aspect from it and you look at the ways that like this kind of delusion exists within the cult, they're like, oh, Charlie's the reincarnation of Paimon, we must serve Paimon, get the soul, and whatever. The fundamental like nature of that is it's just Charlie. It's just the soul of this little girl who had his untimely death, whether by just freak circumstance or at the hands of this cult. And that's reflected in a lot of the scenes in the film. Like when Toni Collette's character is just speaking, like with Charlie via the candle and the mini seances or whatever. There are a lot of different ways that like just humans in general in many different cultures use mediums to like speak to spirits, and the ways that they are represented is extremely vast. And I could get into like an entire like possession topic, which is a good portion of this film towards the end, but the ways in which spirits manifest and inhabit like different objects and people is it ranges. And I think that in this film particularly, they use the imagery of the the little solar flare to kind of say, oh, well, Charlie's still here. Charlie's this like light, and it's not necessarily an evil thing, but it's portrayed as an evil thing in and around what's happening with the rest of the characters. Like that, like towards the end, it gets really intense, right? Yeah, it's just it's interesting to see the ways that they like used like all of the imagery to kind of like show like what's the ghost doing the whole time.
Yeah, I never even thought about that from the perspective of like looking at it from Charlie after she had passed on. I mean, we've talked about how she's involved in the rest of the film, but not necessarily of what that point of view looks like, and I think that's a pretty cool call out. But anyway, as the film progresses, we haven't even talked about Joan yet in a big capacity, which is kind of wild. So Annie decides to go to another grief counseling session, but then she backs out. And as she's leaving the parking lot, she's stopped by a woman she's never seen before named Joan. Joan sympathizes with Annie and later introduces her to the idea of communicating with the dead. Joan shares that she's successfully contacted her deceased grandson through a seance. So, who's Joan? Who is she actually? Let's talk about the seance scenes just in general. Kind of what that whole transition looked like, and it felt like it ramped up pretty quickly after these scenes. Eric, start us out.
So Joan is, of course, Aunt Lydia from Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah.
Yes, she is.
Reprising the role.
Yeah. But yeah, Joan, well, at first, we don't know that she's a member of the cult. And, second watch again, we start realizing more and more how many people just around this family's life were part of that cult and now are descending in on the cult, or on the family, just like hawks on a corpse, basically. Yeah, I mean...
Or flies.
Yeah, or that too. Yeah. But yeah, Joan was obviously, she was the one that wanted to introduce Annie to seances, which then opens it up for Payman to come into the home of, this family. And I think without, the seance, then Payman couldn't actually come into the home. Joan very manipulatively knows exactly, like, she's been spying on her, obviously. And I don't think she was was she at that first grief counseling session? I don't think so.
Yeah, she was.
And so,
Wait,
like, she has been spying on her,
Yep.
comes there a second time to be, like, acting like she was at the grief counseling session, and obviously, makes up this whole lie to then get her back to her apartment and show her how to do a seance. And I think the seance needs to be done in the house to make sure that Payman manifests into the house. But yeah, like, also going back to just how the family's reacting, and also Annie, of course she would be susceptible to do a seance. And I think Annie, we obviously are seeing, she is dealing with this grief much harder than everybody else. Not like Peter and Steven aren't dealing with it hard, but like, she has already lost, her brother to suicide, her dad pretty much to suicide, and just lost her mom. And so, like, when we say this film's about generational trauma, just all of that grief and trauma is now compounding onto the loss of her own daughter, while Peter and Steven, obviously, they're grieving in a different way. And I think it's also a comment on how grief can be such a personal thing, because everybody has a different relationship to people that they've lost, and that grief like manifests in a different way for everybody because the relationships are different too. So definitely Annie is just taking this the hardest of everybody, and she's at her wit's end, and makes her way more susceptible to do things like seances and to kind of slowly devolve into what seems like psychosis too. So
fair. Cole, do you think we can talk to dead people?
Oh man.
Rhea's listening. Be careful what you say.
Yeah.
This is really important because she's going to follow up right behind you.
I would say I have
This
a
is
very
setting you up.
I have a very agnostic view about this, where I feel like there's a good chance you can. I've never experienced anything. I don't have a disbelief, but I just have a no belief of, I'm sure it's possible. I'm sure people are able to feel something, and there's definitely a lot of strange occurrences and like manifestations of things that occur that seem much more powerful than just a coincidence. But I don't know. I feel like I'm a very I need to see it to believe it kind of thing, and I don't fault anyone for believing it, and I don't think anyone if someone had an experience or did a seance and talked to their loved one, I think that's great, and I hope that helped them with their healing and all that stuff. But I've never experienced it, so I feel like I just kind of just at an agnostic viewpoint of just I'm the Dr. Pepper version of what we're talking about. I got too many flavors and I don't really know what's going on, and I'm just here for the ride.
Fair
All right,
enough.
Ray, I want you to respond to that, but I also want you to answer, do people practice seances in the way that they're described in the movie? And then what are some of the details the film might have missed in regards to showing kind of just some of these rituals and specifics?
Okay, so to Cole's point, there are a plethora of ways that people like try to talk to like the dead. And in the ways that I, as an anthropologist, study the dead is as these are the spirits of dead humans, and humans have inherent traits that they have regardless of what form they're in. And so the way in which we speak to them just has to change because they're living in some different condition than they are when they are alive. So that looks like a lot of different things in many different cultures, and I think that this movie actually does a very good job of most of the ways in which people who I would consider informants speak to the dead, which is they do it by themselves. They conduct these. So obviously Joan like showed her how to do it, but she was doing it by herself, or she was doing it with close family members in a very small capacity. And I think that is a good representation of the ways that like most people, and I'm gonna speak from like a Western contemporary point of view, which is just kind of like the U.S. and the U.K., where that kind of connection is so intimate, and it's done by yourself, or it's done with you and a close family member in a very like small capacity, and it did a really good job of representing that, and it was a very impactful way of showing like how to communicate with your dead child too. And like the movies and the TV shows where like even if it's a reality TV show where it's a bunch of people in a room doing the seance, everyone's holding hands, like that is like what you think a seance is looking like. But when you talk about like I want to speak to a family member, why would that family member as a human being want to talk to me in a room full of mostly strangers? Whereas it's more intimate, that spirit is more likely to come to you and speak to you in that capacity. And I could go on forever about this, but just for the sake of the current conversation, yeah, a lot of different ways to talk to ghosts. I think this movie did a really good job of how most people experience that.
Fantastic. I love that. So we're going to kind of move through the end of this film a little bit here. Well, not quite, actually. But Annie is desperate to reconnect with Charlie, so she convinces Steve and Peter that it's time for a seance. Annie is obsessed with the idea of communicating with Charlie, right? She finds her mother's old photo albums after the attempt to connect with Charlie, and she now starts seeing that her mom was kind of involved in some what might be an occult. She discovers a book of spiritualism that mentions a demon, and we've been talking about Paimon in existence or ad nauseum here. And now we find out that he needs a male host, and the pieces start to unravel, right? The puzzle pieces start to become apparent. Annie finds Joan's name and starts putting two and two together. And now all of a sudden we get these ideas that Paimon's been around this whole time. Reya, you had mentioned it earlier that we, or it might have been Cole, and it doesn't matter who it was, but Charlie has been possessed one way or another at some point before this. I'm under the belief that Charlie's been possessed by Paimon since her birth, since the very first day that she was alive. Does anyone else have an opinion on how long? Do you think it's all the time? Do you think it's wavering? Do you think it's relevant? I think it is, in the sense that we see the decapitation being relevant. So when Charlie is killed, that's when we start seeing the movement of the spirits, meaning that Paimon was within her the whole time. So, thoughts on Charlie and Paimon and the existence of that? Kelly.
Ray's got me thinking about an alternate theory to Paimon, and that is that Paimon never actually comes to fruition in the end, and that it's just Charlie, the person that's inside of her brother's body, and that the whole cult failed. Because I would think that when Paimon would come into this body, maybe he would have a purpose or an idea of everything that was set into motion for himself. But if it's just Charlie, who I think is an innocent kid who is different in the whole hereditary atmosphere and this whole idea of it's mental illness that's being carried on throughout the generation. And Charlie has you can see that she has something going on physically when you look at her. It's not something that's a mystery. So she has a different way that she's treated throughout her entire life. It's apparent. And I think that she is just an innocent kid. And I think that maybe because her spirit is kind of maybe pure and youthful and all of these kind of things, maybe she does hang around to make sure that her family might be okay, because she knows that things are going wrong. And that's everything is set into motion in a way that it creates this kind of capsule that she's able to enter into. And I feel like it all happens on an accident, because when Peter, or Paimon in the end, is manifested, he doesn't look like he knows what's going on. He looks like he's a kid in a body brought back
Fair
to
enough.
life.
All right, Rhea, what do you think?
Yeah, and that is my general understanding of this film, or the way that I understood it, is that Paimon is a concept. It sure is a paranormal movie at its roots, with all of the stuff that ends up happening, but there is she's terrified when Charlie is put into Peter's body and they're like, "Hail Paimoning," she's just like a squirrel. That's not what a demon king would do. They took all this time to get a demon into into this kid's body to do all that. And obviously there are scenes in this film where there is a malevolent being at play. Right? So the school scene where Peter's slowly starting to be forced out of his body, and he's being
exactly where we are right now,
contorted and doing all of these things, and then obviously Toni Collette's character is possessed by something, and she decapitates her head. So there is a malevolent being in place here, but also, if you remember, we go back to the solar flares, which in two different instances I think are two different things happening, where there's always a cult member that is kind of close when those things are happening, whether it's Joan or some other random person that we don't know, and the light shines on Peter, the light shines on Toni, and then something adverse happens. So whether it's a spell being conjured or something that is causing them to, start the manifestation process, because obviously, not obviously, so for demonic possession there are stages, and infestation is one of those stages, where the person who is being possessed, their sanity and their insides are rotting out in a spiritual way, where it's making room for the demon. So whatever's happening to them in this film, that is what's happening. But to Kelly's point, and what I think the overall point ends up being, is that yes, this is a generational thing, but it ends with Charlie being just a kid in this position that they put her in. And I'm gonna go off on a rant here. So as a trans woman, I feel like there is a lot of trans metaphors in this film, particularly in two different places, where the brother that was noted at the beginning stating that, oh, mom was trying to put people into my head. And obviously Paimon needs a male host. And so at that time, if there was a situation where, oh, well, we're putting people into their head, obviously at that point, that was the current iteration of Paimon that was perceived by the cult. He killed himself, stopped that from happening, so where does that connect back into the generations? Well, it ends up obviously skipping Peter for some reason and end up being in Charlie. But Charlie is a woman. Charlie can't possibly be Paimon because Charlie was born wrong. Like, that's stated multiple times in the film, like, in relation to this. And they need to correct her female form. And in doing,
they're so over the top with that, like, correction being very, very apparent. Yeah,
because Paimon needs a male form to enter into the world.
but they were dead set on Charlie being the newly like chosen like form of Paimon, though, which I'm just like, if they just needed a male host, why didn't they just have Paimon resurrect into Peter? So there's this...
And if everything that they teach us about Paimon, that's really the one thing that they really hammer home over and over again, is this whole gender aspect.
Yeah, and so, and there's also something that is associated with, like, Charlie's identity as a person throughout the whole thing, because it wasn't the fact that Charlie was a girl, it was the fact that Paimon was just born in the wrong body. Can't relate to that at all, but at the same time, it's like for the sake of the film, like they're just like, oh, we gotta fix her, we gotta make her right. How are we gonna do it? We're gonna kill her and we're gonna put her soul inside of her brother. Obviously, that fixes all of the problems, right? But it just
Eric,
go ahead.
on.
I think so. Obviously, there was trauma with Annie's brother dying or killing himself, Annie's dad killing himself, and then the mom seemed like she just was not emotionally there for her daughter, maybe even gaslit her and was emotionally abusive. There was definitely so many things, like she said her mom was an enigma. She didn't know her at all, really. So after her brother and dad died, she could not turn to anybody to grieve over that. And then her mom dies. She can't turn to grieve to her husband or her son. And then all of this death and trauma from her mom is now compounded. And when her daughter dies, she feels even more isolated. And I think the ending is literally her doing anything she can to bring her daughter back, her dead daughter, who will never come back. And I think it's kind of like a metaphor for her destroying the family and driving her husband and her son into complete trauma, melancholy, depression, like all of her trauma now manifesting on them because she wants her daughter back over all else, and it's the only thing that can ever save herself and her own life. And I mean, she even said when she was crying on the floor, like, I just want to die. And now this is just her. All of her trauma is now manifesting onto her husband and her son when they are already dealing with trauma of their own. So that's kind of how I took it. But yeah.
Go ahead, Ray.
So I have a key point to make, which I think this is a scene that we've kind of like skated over, which I don't think we have recognized we have done so yet, but I feel is very important. The scene where she is having the dream that's taking her back to the moment where she was sleepwalking and poured gasoline all over Peter and almost lit him on fire and killed him. And that
I thought that was another dream. Like she
paint thinner,
whatever.
Yeah, like she was having the same dream again. Okay, yeah.
But yeah, we haven't talked about the sleepwalking aspect. Of
but
this
that
film
was a thing that happened. That wasn't just a dream.
Yeah.
That was a thing that actually happened. And it takes me to the concept of motherhood and how we've had these like conflicting viewpoints of like, oh, is Toni a good mom? Was she like trying to like besmirch her like motherly like, you know, activities because she couldn't like, you know, cope with the death of her daughter? Well, I think there are all of these like subconscious mechanisms that are working inside of her brain that led her to hate Peter because of the role that Peter inevitably ends up playing in the film. tries to kill Peter. I never wanted to be your mom. There are reasons for that. She didn't want to be your mom because the fate that befell you is nothing that a mother ever wants to have for their child. And there's something in her that was saying, oh, I need to kill Peter. I need to light Peter on fire. Why would that be relevant? Well, it's because Peter ends up being the host for a demon, or alleged demon. And like I think there's a lot of like these subconscious themes where it's just like maybe Toni is so traumatized that she is doing these things because she feels like she is being a good mother. She's pushing her son away because the closer that he is, the closer that he gets to the trauma that was brought by the grandmother. So for some reason she male figures, because obviously she, like Emily, that's her name, right? Bogarted like all of Charlie's attention when she was younger. Andy, the grandmother.
Yeah.
The grandmother, yeah. Ellen took all of was like, "Ooh, I'm gravitating towards Charlie for a reason." But then she also kept Peter at a distance, Peter being the male figure who ends up obviously playing a larger role at the end of the film. And it just makes me think that they're trying to make Andy the bad guy, but in the end, like, she's subconsciously being a mom in the most visceral way possible.
Yeah, I think she even mentions trying to protect him in the dinner scene, where they talk about, like, that's all I ever tried to do was to protect you, one way or another. At least that was my impression. But Kelly, what do you think?
She says about when she had Peter that her mom wanted to be all over him and wanted to be really involved, and that was a very intentional thing that she did, was to separate her mom from him. But by the time Charlie came around, I think that her batteries were worn out, and she was like, okay, come on in. And that's why Charlie became Ellen's favorite person. So it's like there's that like protective instinct, but it also didn't necessarily benefit Peter. And like all of that is a really real thing. Removing the whole cult, removing the whole demonic, removing all of that. That can be absolutely a thing that happens with moms, with grandmas. And I think we should also mention Steve, the dad, at this point, too, because he's such an interesting character in the fact that, like, you don't marry a person, you marry the whole family. And he's, like, our, like, outside perspective that's just, like, witnessing all of this and caring about his kids and worried about his wife and concerned constantly. And I think that he's such a good aspect to this whole movie, too.
Yeah. Cole, what did you think about Steve the Dad? And Eric, you too. I want both of you to tell me about Steve the Dad.
Yeah, I mean, I like Steve the Dad. I think he played the perfect kind of like straight man in terms of instead of being the comedy side, he's like the straight man for the horror or for the cult, and he's trying to be the pillar that I think he wants to be in terms of the, you know, for the father to his son, and he's got to protect his son, and he's trying to hold things together, and watching his
dying on the inside.
Yeah, he's dying on the inside while he's
crying it in the car.
Watching his wife kind of devolve into, in his mind, like a psychotic break, and his son is traumatized beyond belief. He lost his daughter. His whole life is crumbling, and his wife, her whole like miniatures and that whole like artistic business is kind of failing as well, and he's just trying to do his best, and it's just sad to watch almost. And like, and again, in his mind, he just sees people essentially going through psychotic breaks and kind of grasping at straws and going through this whole like mental anguish, and then the poor guy just gets caught in the middle of Paymont and gets lit on fire.
Let's talk about that scene.
He didn't even want to touch the book.
Eric, you first, then we'll talk about that scene.
Well, I also wanted to point out that Ellen, Annie's mom, literally, her physical body was in the house.
Yeah.
Like, that's a big metaphor. Like, literally, her physical body is ever present in that house and is still living there even after she's died. Not living there, but, you know, there after she died. And I think that's just a very obvious metaphor for, like, how the mom is still affecting things after death. And I also think that, I forgot where I heard this, but, like, I heard that, like, knowing a person when they're alive and knowing a person when they're dead are kind of two completely different things. Because a lot of times after people die, you figure out a lot more about the history of their life but then they are not there to answer for it anymore. And I think in the case of Annie and her mom, like her mom always lied to her, gaslit her, and never told her anything about the history of her life. And now it's like the grief of her mom now figuring out way more about her life, but she's not there to answer for it anymore. That life and the history of her life is still there, ever present in the house. And also her relationships with her mom and her dad and her brother are still affecting her. And now her own family, to this day, long after those people are all dead and gone. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So we glazed over a couple of scenes here quickly. We get one where Peter is slamming his head into his desk and bloodies his own face. Apparently, when Mr. Wolff did that in real life, Alex Wolff actually bloodied himself while slamming his own head into what was a foam desk, but he did it with such vigor, he bloodied himself. Anyways,
Dislocated
so that just
his
shows you
jaw.
how. He was also apparently in character for the entirety of this entire filming. Just really wanted to be possessed creepy boy, which is great. You know, so we want.
We love possessed
Film
creepy
rocket
boys.
towards its conclusion. The horrors of what have befallen the Graham family become very apparent. We've talked about the dead body in the attic. That was a thing. Do flies on dead bodies freak anybody else out, or is that just me? Or just flies in general?
Yeah, flies are
Like,
disgusting.
flies are like way up there on my list of things that are just not cool in any capacity. And there was a lot of flies coming out of the attic.
Kind of like the it's another word I can't think. Harbinger of the dead.
Yeah.
It's what you see first before you know an absolute horror will be beset before you.
I love it how they reference the smell like way before they actually get to that scene too. Like, what's that smell?
Yes,
And then forget
yes.
about it and then come back later. Another cool part, the whole thing is we talked about how did Grandma get up there? Did you notice that when the family came in, they told them to take their shoes off, right? And they would always have the shoes off. But the scene where they come back from, I don't even remember where it was. You can hear the sound design, and we might not have time to talk to it a lot, but you can hear footsteps running throughout the house. But the footsteps clearly have shoes, have literally footwear on. So it's assumed that's the cult members putting Grandma in the attic as the family's coming in. Because
with so many of them nude too.
Right, absolutely. Who would have figured? But,
That's
tacky.
the worst and scariest scenario.
Anyway, as a viewer, at what point did this movie
Cole
make
was going to say
sense?
something.
Oh, Cole, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I just
I
want
see that finger.
I just want to talk about the flies for a second.
Oh, yeah. Please.
I love this movie. I think it's a fantastic movie.
Cole soapbox, here we go.
Here comes the butt.
Yep,
But
gotta have it.
how did they think that was the best way to show flies, was just like weird black blobs? I just it drove me crazy every time I saw it. It just felt like I was watching. I was back in high school, and it was like 2 a.m. and I'm watching the Sci-Fi Channel, and there's some apocalyptic movie, and they see a dead body, and there's just a bunch of terrible flies flying around, and they're just swinging at nothing. I wish they spent a little bit more money or time on the fly design. It bothers me every time I see it. I know it's such a small, annoying thing, but man,
Cole's
you
hot
gotta
take.
do something better than that.
Cole's
Fly
soapboxes
budget.
are never
Fly
disappointing.
budget
I-
too low.
Yeah,
Now-
$10 million
now
doesn't
hiring.
give you good flies.
Now hiring fly
I
designers.
mean, if you're if you're gonna, if flies can't be that expensive, just get real flies if you're gonna do it, or maybe make a bunch of miniatures. You're already spending a bunch of money on miniatures. Just make miniature flies and start throwing them at
What's
people.
the
I
ultimate
don't know.
fly movie? Like the best flies you've seen in a
The
movie?
fly.
Oh, I mean, besides Jeff Goldblum turning into
Yeah.
a fly,
Naturally.
naturally.
Oh, the mummy.
Oh, the mummy.
Yeah,
There you go.
But that's like the scarabs.
No,
so
well,
much
he
in the
also
mummy.
does
Locusts?
this part where he opens his jaw and a bunch of flies come out. That's kind of sick, and they kind of get the sound and everything down, and it's
All right.
not just
I think
weird.
it's my job as the host to bring us
It's just
back into the
The
moment.
problem is they
No, I'm
are
gonna talk about Imhotep.
they're plastered on. They're like
Imhotep.
they're like 2D flies. They're just
Brandon
black
Fraser, we
dots
talked about.
moving around. At least give them some shadows or make them feel like they're a part of the scene. They're just it's like
Alright.
a Snapchat filter thrown on top.
I'm with you, buddy. I'm with you. So how do we digest the end of this scene? How do we digest the end of this movie, right? We get Annie trying to destroy Charlie's sketchbook, realizing that she can't because it'll light herself on fire. Then gets Steve to try to burn the book, but he refuses. Annie then throws it into the fire, resulting in Steve being consumed by flames instead. That was nuts. Anything about the visual effects about the scene? I mean, the guy got
They
lit
clearly
on fire.
spent all their fly budget on the fire scene because that was awesome. Like they
That's
nailed it.
What do you think, Reya?
I thought that this was like a really good like return to they have zero autonomy in this situation. Like Steve, who is this like very overt side character who is like the dad, who's supposed to be like the protector, right? And in the end just ends up getting murked like in the most horrendous way possible. I just think it's like it's a good just full circle to like they had zero control over any of it.
Yeah, 1,000%, absolutely, and I thought that's well stated. As we Kelly, yeah, go ahead.
It's such a visually impacting scene that when I put together the cover photo for this very podcast, the first image that I grabbed was Steve engulfed in flame.
Steve.
It
Yeah.
is so good. And it's
Powerful.
another aspect of they did like the theater kind of setting. We got a person on the left, we got a person on the right. One of them's on fire, the other one's witnessing it, and it's just like
Brilliant.
mwah.
We're gonna review our next week. Our review is Portrait of a Lady on Fire, but this is Portrait of a Man on Fire.
Absolutely.
It is.
It really is. Poor Steve. Man, what a guy. Anyway, Peter comes home and finds his father dead, smoldering on the ground, and his mother acting a little erratically, we'll say, because now Annie's fully possessed by Paimon. She chases Peter throughout the house. This was the one moment for me while watching where I had an audible jump scare. I legitimately went, oh, fuck, as Annie was running out of the corner at Peter, and had a moment where I was very scared. And it went off on this whole big thing as Peter runs into the attic, tries to hide. Annie is now levitated onto the ceiling and is bashing her head repeatedly into the trapdoor. Holy shit, this scene just gets chaotic and crazy. Did anyone else get a little terrified during this moment? Was I the only one on your first watch? Tell me more a little bit about this ramp up of where this really hits the horror moment. Like, we had a slow burn, and then this last 10, 15 minutes is like, all right, now you know what you're in for, and they frickin' ram it at you. Rhea, you first.
Yeah, like Kelly said, the whole movie is a slow burn, and you like are just mildly uncomfortable the whole time, and then the last 10 minutes, it's like, ha! Like the scene leading from Toni, like just doing the shit to the like that terrified me. That is what kept
Piano
me up
string
at
through
night.
the neck.
And then
that
then
too.
straight to the piano like decapitation.
Oh,
like
yeah, that-
fuck
Yeah,
that.
the garrote. Yeah.
No
Ugh.
horror.
It's the head banging on the attic
Oh.
that is the most impactful for me, where I was like, oh my gosh, that's not
Really-
a human no more.
Really good, traumatizing, horrific imagery.
Yep, 100%. And then at that point, right, we just talked about it. Peter then now watches as his mother literally chops her own head off while she's floating in midair, and he jumps out the window. Now, here's the question. Does Peter die? Did he commit suicide? Or is he only weakened to the point where Paimon can take over? Demons famously need to have a host that is now weakened and broken down to be able to infect. We haven't talked about it too much, but there's certain leaves that they can drink. We see it in the feeding of baby Charlie. I think it's tea of Dittany or something along those lines. It's actually written down somewhere where it allows you to basically be encapsulated by this demon. So, does Peter die, or is this just a moment where he's, weak? Who wants to go first on this one? Rhea, what do you think from a demonology standpoint?
So going back to the brother, like he was the apparent host of Paimon, like at the beginning, committed suicide. Obviously, like the soul was there, they need to intertwine a little bit, killing himself, stop that from happening. So Peter not being the original host and Charlie being the host, being a spirit that has no corporeal form. I 100% think Peter died. I think the whole point was Peter to die in some horrific manner so that Charlie's soul could inhabit him. Otherwise I go back to my argument, like, why wasn't Peter just the host for Paimon to begin with?
Right. Other than maybe that Annie was successfully kept Peter away from her mother because they were estranged, and that could have been it. Like if she was able to successfully keep her away long enough, and that's why she had to settle for Charlie, which is the only thing I can think of long term. But anyway, so basically this happens. Peter is now resurrected, and we see a shadow floating above him, which is the headless corpse of his mother floating into the treehouse, which we haven't even mentioned once. The treehouse being an incredibly big imagery piece throughout this entire film as a place of safety for people to go, whether it be Charlie or Annie, and now it being King Paimon's basically chapel, as it were.
I think it's just Paimon, right? We keep saying Paimon. I think it's Paimon.
It's both ways. You can say it.
You can say it
either
both
way.
ways.
I think
Okay.
even if you look back at the episode that you and Reya did, same thing. It could be either Paimon.
We don't want to really say it accurately, lest we invoke him.
Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice.
Oh no! Anyway, did this feel like a full circle moment for anybody else? The amount of time that the cabin or treehouse is featured in the preceding scenes and the final crowning makes this space feel familiar. Anybody agree with me? Eric, Cole, Kelly?
Familiar?
I agree with you.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, I like your idea on it being a place of safety first for Charlie, and then for the mom, because that makes her feel closer to Charlie. And in the end, though, I don't get much of a place of safety. Maybe I'm just like the imagery of the headless, corpses and everything, and then obviously Peter, now being Charlie. I'm trying to think of the imagery of that, other than these souls now live on with the house and the treehouse as a metaphor. But yeah.
Right. I feel like the treehouse is often represented for this film for one reason or another. Maybe because of the striking visuals of the space heaters and the glowing eye. Yeah. We see that scene where Peter's eyes are reflected with the glowing light of the treehouse. I don't know. I just feel like it's relatively important. Reya, what do you think?
Two things. And correct me if I'm wrong here. Is there a miniature of the treehouse?
I don't think
so.
Okay,
Not
so
that I remember.
treehouse.
No.
I mean, just on
Place
that
of
note,
safety.
treehouse is outside of the narrative. Like, it exists as its own entity. It exists as Charlie's space to go to be safe, but it also at the end is elevated above everything else, which also shows that outside entities looking downward towards all of the main characters and controlling their lives, also not being anything that's predictable. The tree house is just this like little piece of imagery that we get, but it's also not part of the whole scheme of things until the end of the film, and I think that that's worth noting just as a narrative piece.
Yeah, it's wild.
It's not crafted by hand, like small and meticulously. It was crafted by hand, but it would have taken more than one person.
Yeah. And the fact that they featured it in the very first scene of the film where Steve goes up and finds Charlie asleep in there, it just feels like a complete full circle moment from start to finish on this one. All right, we need to finish and wrap this up. We are going, and I get it. This film dictates that a lot of conversation be had about it, and we could probably talk for another hour easily. We have not talked about cinematography at length. We have not talked about sound design and soundtrack at length. We have not talked about all the different camera angles and things that go into this. We haven't talked about a lot of the other things that we talk about when we normally tow for films, because this is such a deep film. But to that point, are there anything on any of those topics that we want to touch on here before we finish up and wrap our film? I know the ending, I'm leaving it vague for a reason. I want everyone to watch it for themselves. Watch the crowning of King Paimon. Look at the ending, how you feel like it strikes. But for the rest of you, one of those points. Anything else you want to throw in here before we wrap this bad boy up?
I think the trauma has won. I think that is kind of the ending. Is just the trauma has now won and has taken the whole family with it, along with everybody close to the family. So
there was no free will. It was fate the entire time, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the major theme. We've talked about it.
And does it make it more or less tragic?
Yeah. I honestly...
the answer to that.
Yeah, what is the answer, Kelly?
The answer is that it's more tragic because predestination removes the possibility of hope.
Wow. And hope is everything, as we've heard in a lot of other
and then
forms of media.
Also, the teacher says, the teacher in the English class also, there's one quote that says, "They are all pawns in this horrible, hopeless machine." So there's your other clue in to saying this was predestined the whole time.
All right, guys, we have talked a lot. This film is fantastic, and it's got so many different layers, and I'd love to revisit it again. It might be one of those episodes in several years down the road where we go, let's just talk about Hereditary again, because our opinions might have changed, or I may have seen it 4 more times between now and then.
Yeah.
And it's going to be kind of fun. Thank you for being on this journey with me. We're going to jump right into our reviews. I am going to go first. This film was very, very interesting to me in a lot of different levels, mostly because what we've talked about, where you have a viewing of it when you look at it the first time, and because I haven't watched it a second time, all I have now is my research for this episode that really pulls a different veil for me and shows me that when I do get to it again, my appreciation for it will be even higher than it was the first time around. Some of these films I literally leave in tears or feeling a certain way. This one didn't do that so much for me as it got me excited to host it too. I think there's a little bit of a different mentality when you go into an episode where I know it's weird, go into a movie, go into an episode, but for me they kind of blend together. But I have to think about the questions that I have to ask and the discussion that we try to want to move. And I think that's really important in this film, that because it gives it to you. It already presents it. Every scene is a different question. Every scene has a different symbol. Every scene has a different backlog or a backstory that you can digest, and that's what makes this film so much fun to watch and so much fun to talk about too. A24 in general, the best ones are the ones that make you think for days, weeks, months after the fact, and this film absolutely does that 1,000%. And it's only been, for me, a couple days since I've seen it, but I know I'll be thinking about it for a very long time. There's a reason, if you look at the 100 and whatever titles that are in A24, there's only a certain handful that really stick out in the pantheon, and this is up there. The acting was fantastic, the directing and writing was fantastic. Ari Aster goes on to do many, many great things, and it all starts with this film. I cannot wait to tell everybody who doesn't know about this film to watch it. I've already started today with a couple of my coworkers and my family members, and it's just going to be a whole lot of things. And even though it's been out for 6 years, I feel like it's still a new movie, and it's going to be a lot of fun to digest and continue to talk about. Great film, awesome. A24 for me, fantastic. And that's all I got. All right, Eric, I want you to go next.
I'm going to keep mine short and sweet. It's kind of hard to discern between A and A+. I don't know what the films I've given an A+ to, if this one doesn't deserve it or not. It's one of my favorite A24 films. But then I try to think of, on a grand film scale, if I would put it in my, top 25 films of all time, which I think the other 3 films, Moonlight, Ex Machina, and First Reformed, I probably would have put in my top 25 films of all time. Not sure I would put this one in there. So, hard for me, but I'm going to just have to give it an A, not an A+. Still, probably top 5 A24 film for me, and just really, really good film. I would suggest everybody, look, obviously, if you've gotten to this point in the episode, you watched it, but from now on, as I talk to other people, I will suggest this film to them, and Midsummer after. I would say watch this film first before Midsummer. So, yeah.
There we go. All right, Kelly.
You can watch this movie after Midsummer, like I did, because I think that this movie's honestly flawless. No notes. I wouldn't do it any differently. I think that it's a really phenomenal movie. Not just in the horror genre. I think it is beyond horror. It's like a scary therapy movie in a way. I really, really love it, and I love it more on my second watch. I know I'm gonna watch it again and again, and like you said, Kevin, I think that it's gonna have a little bit of a different meaning every time. I understand, and I will watch that YouTube video that's 4 hours long. I get why that could be made, because like I said, I feel like we can go scene by scene, and there's so much meaning and symbology behind every single choice that's made in this movie. There's our vocab word for the day, and I got it right.
The word you're looking for is symbolism. Symbolism.
Anyways, what I would say, like I said, no notes. This is easily an A+ 24.
All right, Cole, you're next.
Yeah, so I love this film. I'm always a big fan of a good horror film. I think the build-up and the overall story, set design, just like everything was so thought out, so well done. I don't understand why they didn't think more about the flies, but I digress. It's a wonderful film. Highly suggest it. It's one that always pops up when you ever talk about A24, and they're like, "What's A24?" It's like, well, have you heard of Hereditary? It's usually one of like the first films that you kind of throw out that people are like, "Oh yeah, I've heard about that film." So I always recommend it. I think it's definitely one of the best like modern possession based films that kind of deals with the occult and all that stuff. I think they've it's just fantastic film. I wish the flies were better. That's why it's going to get an A24. Miss the plus.
All right, and our guest of honor, Reya, take us home.
This movie will continue to be a movie that I recommend to any horror fan, like from now until the end of time, because I go out of my way to watch pretty much all horror films, regardless of how they're reviewed, because I think horror can be ingested in a bunch of different ways. And I think from start to finish, this movie keeps you at the edge of your seat the entire time. Like Kelly said, no notes, A+ 24. Go see this film, watch it 900 times.
All right. Viewers, listeners, thank you so much for joining us on another episode of A24 on the Rocks. Like and subscribe. Please give us a 5-star rating if you enjoyed yourself. Thank you for being here. Check us out on all your socials, and we can't wait to see you in the next one. Thank you all for being here. Have a great rest of your night, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye.
Bye-bye.